The state of Iowa has been a destination magnet for more than a year. Hopeful presidential candidates have been dropping in with regularity, shaking hands, meeting people, making speeches, enduring some questionable meals, I'm sure, all preparing for tomorrow night and the Iowa caucuses. Following Monday, the parade will quickly move on to New Hampshire and their primaries in a week. And maybe the candidates will be thinned out a bit through either Iowa or New Hampshire. And then the spectacle will move on to South Carolina and Nevada primaries. We have now become accustomed to this spectacle every 4 years. It's a messy and perhaps not always such a fair way of choosing those who will finally appear on the ballots in November. The candidates are spending bushels of money to make their case, presenting themselves in personal appearances, in media ads, enticing the undecided and the wavering to choose them to go forward. Each candidate has assembled paid staff members, most of them from out of those states, to organize and arrange and facilitate. But each of those candidates will be dependent on numerous volunteers to implement the strategies and finally to turn out the voters. It often will come down finally to which candidate can secure and energize the most avid volunteers. Without those grassroots volunteers, the whole effort grinds to a disappointing halt. I thought about that this week, and it seems to me that most worthwhile community efforts and laudable campaigns are always dependent on volunteers. The scouting program, the veterans organizations, the roadside trash cleanup, extracurricular school activities, civic clubs. For each of them, willing volunteers are the lifeblood for accomplishing the program and the objectives of those groups. Paid staff is good, usually very good. It's volunteers that make the wheels go round over and over again. St. John United Church of Christ, almost from its beginning, had a paid staff person, one or two or sometimes three, ministers, custodians, music staff, office people. But from the very beginning, this church and others like it have been utterly dependent on volunteers. Volunteers, people willing to give time and talent and energy to keep the enterprise we call the church moving from year to year, from program to program, from endeavor to endeavor. The guy or gal up front may be the most visible person, but it's the folk you don't see up front who really make it all happen. These are the lifeblood and the strategic difference makers in every congregation I have known. The volunteers are the ones who keep the enterprise moving forward. I can attest to that in this church as I have known it over the years, and every other church I have been a part of. Those former churches I served, I could list the names because I remember them very well. You wouldn't know any of them. They are the communion of saints as far as I am concerned. Unassuming folk who bless those churches over and over again with joyful service and a willingness to share their time. These are people, like people here, who said yes when it wasn't their turn, They quietly stepped up and the task was accomplished. They were modest about their gifts, wondering, maybe I can do that, but I'm not so sure about that. Not sure if they were the right ones for the job, but they did their best. And it was always enough and more than enough. Jeremiah was the unpaid staff for the God of the Hebrews back in the 600s. He didn't audition for the job, didn't submit a resume for the position of prophet, not in his planning at all. I doubt if the call that I read of Jeremiah before was quite as dramatic as we have it now in the record, but it may have been. It is for sure for some people. For many others, the call is a slow dawning, something that tells you something important is going on here, but I don't understand it. Something is happening here, and I may be a part of it. Jeremiah's first response was typical of what it may be for many of us. God, whatever you have in mind, certainly does include me. You've got the wrong person for the job for sure. Not me. Not now. Jeremiah thought he was too young, hoping that would be a disqualifying attribute, or that he didn't possess the right gifts, the gift of speaking. For after all, a prophet has got to be speaking to people. But Jeremiah, with his lingering reservations, agrees to give it a try. And through the turbulent days of the fall of Jerusalem to the Babylonians, Jeremiah was on duty every day, speaking for God to people who didn't like him or his message. And Jerusalem fell. Not me. Not now. Those are typical responses for most of us when someone asks us if we are the right ones for some task or duty that they may have in mind or that the community has decided is important for them. Most of us who are here this morning cannot claim to be too young. That's not going to be a disqualifying impediment. Most of us are far more gifted than we ever have given ourselves credit for. And most of us are more strategically positioned to do various things than we ever thought possible. And so in a minute, I'm going to give each of you a specific task, and you're going to be excited about it. Most of the customary volunteer positions in this church have been filled by willing people, thank God for you. The usual slate of officers and committees is filled. I believe each of us, every one of us, is called to be an evangelist, a conveyor of the good news. We live in a mission field. The majority of the people who live around us are not involved in any Christian community. That is a fact. I heard that the majority of youth under the age of 18, in fact 60% of the youth under the age of 18, have never attended a Christian worship service of any kind. 60%. The majority of adults are not in any church here this morning. The majority. In some cases, they've given up on the church. In some cases, they've been hurt by the church, and they remember the hurt. And in some cases, they have never taken the church seriously as being a community in which they could belong or they would belong. They've written us off. We've become irrelevant. Now, these are not bad people. They make good neighbors and good work colleagues. But more than 60% of the people who live within 5 miles of this building have no association with a Christian faith community. 60%. Our task then is to invite those we know and those we might know to see if what we are attempting to become here, St. John United Church of Christ, meeting in an unlikely building on a barren lot by the side of the road, could in fact be a faith community in which they would grow as Christians. I do think we have something to offer for those who would be curious about us. That we have something to offer when we are at our best, which is most of the time. For we proclaim a God of love who loves all, and for us it is a big all. Loves all. Like it says at the top of the bulletin, no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. And it's true that we are only living our way into that statement little by little, but we're trying to live our way into that declaration. That is our intent. We as a community seek to live by grace and not by judgment. We will be a curious people, open to questions large and small, seeking to understand God's ways among us that are always being revealed in little pieces and in large understandings. While our roots go back to the very origins of the Cumberland community and the area around us, we will be adventuresome in seeking new ways to worship and to serve and to fellowship. Although we are German in heritage, we will be inclusive in practice. We will be loving people who are hopers in the world in which we live. We will be grateful and generous, learning how to do that more and more. We will be loving and forgiving, not perfectly, but committed to becoming ever more so. I've asked a couple people to pass something out to each of you, and they are standing up right now. They are standing up right now. They are standing up right now and are willing to do that. And if a couple of others you want to be part of the endeavor, do so. I want you to look at that. Some of us, years ago, became enamored with the still speaking effort of the United Church of Christ to say that we are people of the comma. Gracie Allen, in one of her statements, George Burns' wonderful wife, said, "Never place a period where God has placed a comma." Never place a period where God has placed a comma, meaning that we always are expectant that God will lead us from what we have known already to what God still wants us to know for as long as we are alive. So we've been people of the comma. God is still speaking. But we are not just comma people, as this would say, anymore. We are people who bring questions, and questions are fine. They're welcomed. They're appreciated. We will experience joy together. Fellowship is something that ought to lift our spirits. We will feel included and help others to feel included. And we are always seeing ourselves as being part of something greater than ourselves. Yes, us, but others as well. I want you to share this invitation. Give it to someone you know, or someone you will soon know because you've had the conversation. Invite them to continue their faith journey here with us. Now, they may not like us, we may not be the fit for them, but they may. Invite them to be here. We're going to be here next Sunday at 10 o'clock. You can count on that, and they can count on that. And it would be good if you would be here too, to welcome those that you have invited. And if you need more of these, they can be made available. Not me. Yes, you. Not now. Why not now? Amen.